Welcome to the Braver Women Show. I'm Leanne C. Jones, your straight-talking therapist and founder of Braver Women. I teach anxious LGBTQ plus women all over the world how to stop feeling insecure and start showing up courageously with more impact and power. Every episode is packed with proven, actionable strategies, lived experiences, and of course, my no-nonsense insights, so you can stop letting your emotions run the show and finally feel in control. And if you're tired of struggling with anxiety, self-doubt, unresolved trauma that's affecting your life and your relationships, or feeling like you're not enough, you don't have to figure it out alone. You'll hear real success stories from women in the Braver Breakthrough program, women who've gone from the anxious patterns of self-doubt to coming out and made life-changing shifts following their work with me. If you ever wondered why you keep ending up in the same place, the same doubts, the same disappointments, the same stuckness, even when you're desperate to move forward, then this episode today is for you, because it's not about you trying harder. It's about waking up to something that you might not even be aware of yet. But by the end of this episode, you'll walk away, hopefully, seeing yourself and your patterns a little more clearly. And with that clarity, you'll have a real choice, a choice that you might not even know that you had. And if you're tired of living on autopilot, tired of thinking, this is just who I am and how things are for me, this conversation will meet you where you're at the moment and what you're experiencing, and begin to show you what's possible. So let's get into it. Now, here's the thing. Nobody I know, nobody wakes up and says, I know, today I think I'll sabotage my own life and make myself feel stuck and really crap for it. But somehow you find yourself stuck in the same patterns, the same fears, feeling like you're going around in circles, the same relationships that leave you questioning yourself, the same ways of thinking that keep you small, the same hiding, the same avoiding those truths that you really need to get clear on, hoping that somehow or somewhere amongst all of this same, that you'll eventually feel stronger on the inside and deal with it all differently next time. And it's not because you don't care, and it's not because you're incapable. It's because you're stuck responding to life, and more importantly to yourself, through the same ways of thinking, behaving, and seeing yourself. And those ways have become so automatic that you barely even notice them anymore, to the point where life can feel like Groundhog Day. And what eventually happens is these ways pull you down a path that tricks you into believing, well, this is just who I am. This is just how my life is. And I'm just going to have to suck it up. But it's not. I want to tell you that if you feel stuck in unhelpful self-sabotaging patterns that you can't seem to alter, that just feel like this is who you really are, then hear me out here. It's not. It's not a personality. It's not just who you are. It's what you've learned to do. It's what you and your nervous system have adapted to feel more accepted, to feel more loved, to feel like you belonged in all those moments in your life so far when you felt like you didn't. And this is what you're really battling with, not a broken self, but a survival self. And after living like that for long enough, it can start to feel impossible to even imagine anything different. Do you recognize what I'm talking about here? You might tell yourself, maybe I'm just one of those people who attracts the wrong partners. Maybe my life is just going to feel like this all the time. And, it's easy to fall into thinking, why the hell does this always happen to me? And that's a natural response, right? But if this has been your way of thinking for a while, it can really impact your life in so many areas profoundly, making you feel that life is something that happens to you rather than with you. And here's what else happens. When you've tried and tried to change something, and no matter what you did, it didn't work. And after a while, you just stop trying and you think, what's the bloody point? And you can go on to see yourself as a victim of past forces and believe without question that your actions won't make a difference in your life. And that's called learned helplessness. Now, learned helplessness is where a person feels powerless to change their situation because they've repeatedly experienced failure or a lack of control in the past, even when they could actually do something about it in the here and now. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you felt like every decision was made for you, leaving you with minimal control over your life? Maybe you had overbearing parents who dictated everything, or perhaps you experienced a traumatic series of events that stripped you of your sense of control. The thing is, as a child, it's natural to feel like life is happening to you because you're dependent on adults for almost everything, and because you have limited autonomy and you're still learning about the world. But these feelings of powerlessness should, in theory, evolve as you grow into adulthood. But women who've had these types of experiences become trapped in this way of perceiving themselves and their personal power like a passive observer in their own lives. Learned helplessness feels like this. You've been knocked down so many times, you stop believing that you can even stand up. You don't see the options anymore. You feel fed up, like giving up, and you don't trust yourself or anyone else. You don't trust anyone anymore because somewhere along the line, your life experiences or people around you in your life journey so far taught you that it's safer not to try anymore. It's not just in your head, this powerless feeling lives in your body. It's like your perspective and your nervous system gets stuck in defeat mode. It's the hesitation, the second guessing, the hiding, the avoiding, the not wanting to face up to things. It's the going in on yourself, the comparing to others, and just continuously beating yourself up. It's why confidence feels out of reach, and instead, it's why that compelling feeling of fear and anxiety runs the show. Anything that involves you making decisions can leave you feeling scared and doubtful whether it will work out. So you stop connecting with yourself, and your only frame of reference becomes firefighting things happening outside of you. You don't trust yourself or your ability to keep yourself steady and keep a handle on things, so you end up playing small in your life. And I think this is the hardest part, but the most important part to realize. Even when things change for you and those horrible situations that made you think and feel this sense of powerlessness are long gone, even when that's all behind you and it's long gone, your nervous system still thinks that you're stuck in the old story. Think about it like this, right? Imagine a bird trapped in a cage for so long, it stops learning to fly. And one day the doors open, for freedom's right there. But the bird doesn't move. Not because it can't fly, it's because it doesn't truly believe that flying is an option anymore. And that's learned helplessness. And it usually develops after being in situations where no matter what you do, the outcome doesn't improve. Over time, you stop trying altogether because you believe that your efforts are just not going to make any difference. Two of the most common root causes of this type of thinking stems from attachment trauma and difficult experiences in childhood. And these shape our emotional responses and our relationships throughout our lives. And it's linked to things like depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and also losing your motivation and your drive. And I want to say this. It's not about weakness, it's about survival. And once you understand it's learned, this type of thinking is learned, this perspective that you have is learned, you can start unlearning it. And it's a process, and I get it. It's challenging if you have this perspective, but understanding that you are operating in this way is the first step in breaking free from this type of mentality. Learned helplessness, I think, is really important to identify in therapy, because if someone's been conditioned to believe that nothing they will do will make a difference, then they won't even try, even when change is possible. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, here's something I think might help you to look at this differently. And there's a small piece of writing, just a few lines long, that captures the experience of being stuck better than almost anything I've ever come across. And it's called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters, written by Portia Nelson. And in part of her book called There's a Hole in My Sidewalk, The Romance of Self-Discovery, Portia was she was an actress, a singer, and a survivor, someone who lived through cancer, grief, and loss, someone who understood what it meant to keep repeating painful patterns, even when you desperately wanted something different. And her work has been shared for decades now in therapy rooms, addiction recovery spaces, trauma work, anywhere where people are doing the real work of waking up to themselves and becoming more intentional and conscious about their role in their presenting problems. Because I think it says in a few simple lines what most people spend years trying to describe, what it's actually like to change when change isn't quick or clean or easy, but when it's real, when it's messy, when it's human. And I want to walk you through it. I want to walk through with it. I want to walk you through it today. And she uses the metaphor of a deep hole to illustrate the concept of learned helplessness. And this poem progresses through the stages of recognizing and confronting a recurring problem, eventually leading to overcoming the feeling of being trapped and finding a new path. Because when I go through this with you now, I wonder which part of this you'll recognize yourself in. So I can help you to become more aware of how you're responding to things in your life right now, what you're doing, so that you can begin to move away from those automatic patterns of feeling helpless and powerless that you might be trapped in. So it starts with the first bit. And she says, I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in, I'm lost, I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. And that's where it begins. You don't see the holes in life that you're exposed to. You fall before you even know what's happening. And you're living in the only way that you know how within this hole. And you end up hurting, scared, confused, stuck. You didn't create the hole. You weren't even choosing it. But this is the very place where you learn to survive. And maybe you can think back to times in your life, times where you repeatedly kept getting hurt, kept getting overlooked, kept getting left out or bypassed, feeling like a passenger along for the ride. And you couldn't for the life of you understand why. You weren't failing, you weren't broken. This is the place where you were surviving the only way that you knew how for such a long time. These things that happen to us that start to shape our perception about what we think we're capable of based on what we've been exposed to so often and so repeatedly. And so it makes sense to feel all of these things that I'm talking about. So the second part goes on to say, I walk down the street, there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same space, but this isn't my fault. Now, before we take a moment, let's just stop there let's just stop there for a second, because I think this part is important. In this part, this is about where the denial kicks in. You sort of know it's there. You feel the edge of it, but pretending not to see it feels way safer than facing what it would mean to really acknowledge it. Maybe you tell yourself it's not that bad. Maybe it'll be different this time. Maybe if I just work harder, love harder, shrink a little more, get them to like me, that'll finally work. And so you fall again. And this time you blame yourself even harder, or you might find yourself angry at the world or the people who have caused you to feel this pain. And you start to think, well, maybe this is just who I am and the cards that I've been dealt. But I wonder if you can recognize parts of this avoidance, part of the pretending, the hoping it'll change without really having to make any change. Because if you can, and you find yourself in this space, it means you're starting to wake up and become more aware. Now, this is where this poem starts to go up a gear, because the third part is this. I walk down a street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it still there. I'm falling. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. And I get out immediately. Now, this part is hard because now you see it. You know it's coming. You even know what you should do differently. And sometimes you still fall. Not because you're weak, not because you're not trying, but because your survival patterns run deep. And choosing differently, even when you see the problem clearly, doesn't happen cleanly overnight. But here's what really matters. You don't stay stuck as long. You know what's happening, you get out quicker. And for me, I think that's progress right there. Now, here's where it really gets interesting. She goes on to say, I walk down the same street. There's a hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Think about that. This is where you move differently. You still feel the old pull back to the familiar. You still hear those old stories and shit FM going off in your head. But this time you don't step into it. Maybe you speak up sooner. Maybe you leave those situations or relationships that drain you. Maybe you start choosing yourself for the very first time. And even when that goes against the grain for you, because it feels really unnatural, it's awkward, it's shaky, but it's different. And that difference is the thing that you choose. That's the thing that you choose to do that can start to make the difference. And just when you thought that was it, this is the last part. This is, for me, the mic drop moment. This is where you've taken a hold of the controls and made a decision to stop being a passenger in your own life and actively make that choice to live more consciously than you've ever done before. And it just goes like this. I walk down another street. This is freedom. Not because life is perfect, not because you're never going to experience emotional pain or pain ever again, but because you're no longer letting familiar survival patterns steer the ship. Instead of reacting, you might still feel that pull or that pain, but with this, you're mindfully choosing, you're deciding to live in a way that's more about who you actually are, not who you had to become from that first hole to survive. And I think this poem beautifully illustrates the journey from not being aware to that full awareness of yourself and your patterns to change them. And I think each step is a testament to the power of persistence and the importance of self-compassion. And I think it's really important to say this. Awareness, I don't think awareness is a magic wand that instantly transforms us. It's a flashlight that illuminates the holes in our path, because that's what personal growth teamed up with self-compassion is about. It's a process, and a process that can help you to recognize that falling into the hole is part of your journey to self-actualization. It's not a failure. Every stumble, every mistake is, I think, a lesson in disguise, guiding us towards a new street where the holes are fewer. The holes are fewer and far between. Instead of beating yourself up and saying, why the hell did you do that? When you move into compassion and you decide to come through that lens, compassion guides you to ask yourself, what's going on there? What was going on there for you that pulled you towards doing that? And it's that curious introspection that becomes the flashlight for you to work with and decide. And here's the part that I think a lot of people miss when they wonder why they're stuck or they're staying stuck for ages. For a pattern to be a pattern, it needs to have the same input and the same output and the same output in a repeated or regular way. In this case, your patterns are your habits of thought, how you choose to think about things, how you choose to think about yourself, and then that feeling that you associate with those thoughts. And in most cases, this brings you to the same predictable result in your life by the pattern of how you continue to react to those thoughts and feelings. I think the key to being unstuck is knowing what part of your pattern you're repeating. And it could be knowing how you're thinking, knowing what it is that you're drawn to, knowing what you're trying to gain from unhealthy people or situations that you're sticking around in amongst that could be done differently. And it's about becoming an observer and giving yourself that conscious choice of deciding to be switched on to what your role is in those sequence of events that turn out to be either painful or joyful. So in that respect, it helps you to see very clearly your role in your current presenting problem, so to speak. And here's the thing that you need to know for anyone serious about feeling differently or perhaps making some changes in their lives. Freedom from problematic anxiety or unaddressed emotions, it doesn't lie in you working hard to establish new repetitive habits. It's done by repetitively disrupting the existing ones again and again until a different way of being starts to feel possible. And that's the real work that my clients do with me every day. It's about recognizing the old pull, seeing exactly where it leads, and with the right support, choosing to respond differently, one conscious decision at a time. And healing, I think, and I said this to someone in the client support group over the weekend, I think healing is about really committing to showing up in those moments where you want to hide or avoid. I think healing, it doesn't mean never struggling again. It means showing up differently to what you would normally do, consistently being aware of your choices and practicing a whole range of those choices. It could be, rather than giving in to that familiar pull of chasing approval, to being aware of that urge to do that. And even though it's uncomfortable, and when you do that, you decide just to give yourself a minute, you pause, you slow everything down and just breathe into that urge. And that minute that you're giving yourself might feel like an hour if you're so used to doing this. But it's the gentle disruption of that familiar pull that lets you see yourself from a different angle. Each time you commit to doing that, you begin to realize that that pattern that you're using to fan those flames of discomfort on the inside come with another option, and one that isn't going to be as detrimental or as destabilizing as you first imagined. In fact, quite the opposite. You then see that the world isn't going to implode in on you because you didn't jump to self-sacrificing for someone else's comfort just for another time. And I think it's also important to name why so many people get stuck here, even when they want to change. I think that we're living in a world now that's moving way too fast. Everything is designed to keep you distracted, busy, comparing, and ultimately consuming. There's always noise, isn't there? There's always urgency. There's always a new happiness hack, a new shortcut, a new way to pretend that you've got it all figured out. And if you're not careful, you get swept up in it all. And you become conditioned to live and respond to it, and you begin to lose your critical thinking. You begin to lose your deepest and most authentic thoughts out of this fear of not keeping up. Think about it. We live in a swipe left, swipe right, next day delivery society, don't we? That's way more focused on doing more, being more, having more. And it means that you stop pausing. You stop thinking clearly. You stop feeling what's actually true for you. You start living further and further away from yourself until one day you don't even recognize yourself anymore. And it can be like you're not living, you're coping. You end up with what I talked about a moment ago, rather than you having control. Life is doing you rather than you doing life. Things happening to you rather than things consciously happening by you. And that's when the hopelessness and the overwhelm sets in. And in most cases, many people seek treatment instead of real supported change, the kind of change that's possible with that right guidance that I've talked about. They want a magic pill to make it all go away. And not because they're lazy. And again, it's not because they're incapable, but I think it's because they've lost connection with who they really are. You start believing you can't change when really you've just been too far away from your own voice for too long, and you've allowed it to become drowned out by everything and everyone else outside of you, the comparisons, the expectations. And it stops being about your personal agency, and it starts being about just an unconscious competition to keep up with, to feel a sense of worth. And real change, I don't think it's not about finding a magic habit or a life hack. It's about simply slowing down, becoming a human being, not a human doing. It's about remembering who you really are. It's about learning how to intentionally live from your truest place, again, on the inside, every day, one real small decision at a time. And that's what my clients do with me, not because they need to become someone else, but because they're finally ready to stop abandoning who they are. And that's the real work. Not racing ahead, not pretending it doesn't hurt, but pausing, seeing and experiencing yourself clearly with clarity, feeling all of your emotions, not just the ones that make you feel good, and choosing slowly, bravely, and honestly to live differently. Not for the world, not for appearances, but for yourself. One street, one step, one moment at a time. So if all of this lands with you, maybe today's not about blaming yourself for how you ended up feeling like this. Maybe it's about finally seeing that you never stopped surviving. It's about waking up to the fact that you were never broken. You just learned ways of coping that made sense at the time, but don't have to define you now. The street doesn't have to stay the same. Your choices don't have to stay the same. And you get to choose differently now if you want to. And so before I go, I want to leave you with these questions today. Maybe you can journal on them or just ponder and quietly reflect on them. But I think that they'd be powerful for you to answer because all of you are here in this community because you want change. So here's the first one. Let me start by asking you, where in my life do I keep falling down the same hole? Where have I stopped believing that things could be different for me? What old survival pattern do I keep mistaking for just who I am? And most importantly, what might be possible for me if I walked down a different street today, or even just once? Because think about this, right? And I want to leave you with this to think about. It's quite powerful. The average human being living to around 75 years old has around 3 billion heartbeats. Imagine those precious moments of life beating away in your chest with every moment that passes, even while you're listening to me now. And I wonder if you can be reminded of just how precious your life is and how many of those beats that you can choose now to fill with meaning, with connection and courage as a queer woman, rather than letting them slip away unnoticed. Every heartbeat is a moment you'll never get back. So how will you spend the next one? Your life is happening right now, beat by beat. Don't wait. Make it count. Take care, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.